So Netflix has a new animated movie coming up titled Steps, following the journey of Cinderella's stepsisters, who will be depicted as, according to them, kind and misunderstood. And while I'm not interested in discussing whether the movie will be good or not, I'm more interested in the conversation that erupted from this announcement, which is, must all classic villains be portrayed this way? And should villains be misunderstood at all? And since I've been in the cesspool that is the Vampire Diaries fandom since I was 14, I felt the urge to type out a mini rant about this. I love a complex character as much as the next girl, but I sincerely miss when villains were just bad, period. Well written, classically evil, and needed to be defeated for the common good of the people. But somewhere along the way, between teenage angst and losing personalities to political causes, our generation has decided that it relates to villains better than the heroes themselves. The femininity of Disney princesses is now seen as an opposition to feminism, the actions of heroism as toxic masculinity, and the rage of villains as the epitome of standing up to unrighteous systems of this world that wield all the power. Valid crash outs, they call them, which has just become a 3-word phrase to justify evil actions without holding the villain accountable. Where actions can barely be justified, some find superficial reasons to love the villains. Their looks, their sense of humor, their potential queerness, their accents, their bodies. Next thing you know, all a villain needs is good looks laced with a tragic backstory, fighting against a protagonist who possesses traditional feminine or masculine attributes, and the audience immediately brands them as complex and misunderstood. Perhaps that is my main concern here. Teaching an impressionable audience that a tragic backstory is similar to complexity or being misunderstood. Sure, it can add to the complexity of a character, but it doesn't automatically make that character complex, let alone misunderstood. In fact, a backstory, tragic or not, ought to help us understand said character, and understanding them shouldn't be equal justifying them as a whole. More importantly, backstories actually shouldn't be needed to make a villain great, and past animated works have proven that. The likes of Mother Gothel, Judge Claude Frollo, Ursula, Death in Puss in Boots' Last Wish, and more have been iconic and memorable without backstories. Their complexities are not in their tragic past, but in their well-written dialogues, the choices throughout their respective films, and the way that they think. It's time tragic backstories get treated as what they actually are. Tragedies, not replacements for complexity. In my last upload discussing Glinda, I outlined the characteristics of a complex character and how necessary each component is in storytelling. Internal conflict, depth and layers, realism, contradiction, and development all make characters, villains or otherwise, truly interesting without victimizing them. Mother Gothel is a narcissist, manipulating a young child for her personal benefit. Zero tragic backstories, yet numerous videos diving into narcissism in parent and child relationships, the mindset of a narcissist, and what actual gaslighting looks like have been made as a result of her character. Not to mention, she's often analyzed as an example on how to write a near-perfect villain. Judge Frollo is a religious figure who wields his faith, which inherently supposed to be good, for both evil and self-justification. Despite having no tragic backstory or storyline that depicts him as misunderstood, he is to this day credited by many as the greatest Disney villain of all time. A tragic backstory doesn't make a villain complex, and a villain's complexity doesn't make them misunderstood, and being misunderstood doesn't make them righteous. That's another concern I have with the political landscape of our generation in relation to villainy. Political preachiness in media often hails the victim status, making victimhood often synonymous with righteousness. That is why some of their impressionable audiences want a tragic backstory for whatever villain they are choosing to objectify so badly, because it gives them a victim status, which then they can elevate and advocate for as complexity. And that's actually wild to me, because real complex characters who aren't evil are often flattened that way by the very same audiences. The likes of Wicked's Glinda, and especially Cinder's Mary, I really need to write an essay on her, are often interpreted as real evil that no one can see. The evilness in question having some sort of white privilege and no automatic victim status. The actual villains of their respective stories do not nearly get as much hate as they do. Pedestaling the victim status as a justification for evil or wrongdoing makes me wonder if we're really going in the right direction with the recent creation of villains. Though she isn't a villain, I started to really see this with the way Bridgerton's Kate Sharma is justified by her fans for having an affair with her sister's fiancé. Edwina is often blamed for being angry at Kate and Anthony's choices because, unlike Kate, she didn't struggle in her childhood. Because Kate is a parentified child who took on the burden of looking after her family after losing her dad, fans somehow feel like she deserved Edwina's fiancé. Like somehow Edwina owed Kate some form of happiness because she didn't struggle as much. Even though the reason she didn't struggle is because Kate and her mother chose to make her naive and decided for her what she could and couldn't handle. I point this out in a video I'm currently working on, which expresses why Edwina was way more interesting in character than both Kate and Anthony, that often less privileged characters are believed to be better deserving for no reason other than just that. being less privileged and having some sort of sad past. I mentioned growing up in the cesspool of the Vampire Diaries fandom, which has created my gripe with Klaus Mikaelson. Do not get me wrong, I adore this man, but nothing makes me cringe more than watching grown adults kiss his ass when he is wrong because, quote unquote, 1,000 years ago he was abused by his dad. For those who didn't watch the show, that's not an exaggeration. Klaus is actually a 1,000-year-old supernatural creature. Klaus believes that he is entitled to the lives of his siblings, that their existence should be on his terms, and anytime they demand their freedom, they find themselves daggered in a box. Klaus's obsession with control is so bad that he will pick on literal teenagers to get what he wants. And when they have the audacity to fight back, suddenly, according to his fans, their choices are quote-unquote unforgivable. Even the love of his life doesn't go unscathed, simply because she doesn't tolerate his bullshit and wants him to be a better man for the sake of his daughter. His controlling, toxic, and constant manipulative actions are often branded as being misunderstood by his delusional fandom. And a good reason is that his philosophy and mindset are way less developed in the show. The writers put way too much emphasis on his parents' failures and his past abuse to the point that they diminish his complexity. Because of this, his choices in the show have been quite predictable and less interesting, messing up storylines with great potential. His fanbase held his looks and accent because his story didn't give them more to appreciate beyond that. Even when we do get good storylines from the show, if he is at a disadvantage, his fans will ruin it for everyone else. Take the finale episodes of the third season of the originals, for example, where Marcel, Klaus's adoptive son, takes a serum that makes him his equal in power.
I'm family, right? Why would this little serum have to change anything other than the simple fact that I would be your equal? Oh, yeah. I figure you could never live with that. Oh, that's funny. I thought you came asking for my forgiveness, but you like it better this way, don't you? And all that pretty fairy tale about me being part of the family? That only works if you're in control. Klaus Mikaelson, smiling down like a benevolent king, showing mercy to all his subjects. But you still have to be the king, don't you?
In his resentment, Marcel reaches a breaking point with the family's hypocrisy when they killed his own adoptive daughter. And the years of abuse of power, justifying it as looking out for their family always and forever, came crushing down. Him becoming their equal and enemy, and the reason they are driven out of New Orleans for the second time, not to mention all this happening because Elijah, Klaus's brother, gave in to fear and fulfilled the very prophecy he was trying to avoid, was the perfect irony that made for an impressive storyline. But apparently, we weren't even allowed to enjoy that, or support Marcel, because boo-hoo, Klaus was abused 1,000 years ago, therefore he deserves to be the strongest vampire around. It's exhausting. If a villain's backstory's only purpose is to make us feel bad for them, I feel that the writers have failed at their job. A backstory must make us understand the character, their philosophy, their journey, the choices that they have made and are currently making, their view of the world, how it relates to the protagonist or hero, and what they truly want from this life. And while yes, it might make us feel bad for them in the process, like we did for Zuko before his arc, in my point of view, it cannot be the main focus of the goal or writer. I got my best friend into the Hunger Games a couple of weeks ago, and yesterday she talked my ear off for almost 3 hours on her analysis of President Snow. Keep in mind, this is just based on the movies. She is yet to read the book, as she needs to finish the original trilogy first, and something tells me when she does read the book, she's gonna have a lot more to say. One of the things she mentioned was how sorry she felt for Snow. Not in a way where she rooted for him, but she pitied the guy. How blurred his view of humanity was, how obsessed he was with power and control, how his upbringing turned him into an opportunist and made him lose real romantic and platonic love in the process, and how ultimately his philosophy, though for a while it fooled him into believing it worked, failed him in the end. She understood his backstory without declaring him misunderstood. She appreciated his complexity without rooting for his character. Though she did thirst for Tom, I mean, who wouldn't? Snow lands on top, come on now. But she truly knew how messed up Snow's character was, and genuinely believed that his demise was necessary in Mockingjay. On the more kid-friendly side, Titan/Hal from Megamind is another good example of a villain with somewhat of a backstory. The classic nice guy whose good deeds depend on his entitlement to a girl's affections. When Roxanne won't return his feelings, despite him changing in all the ways he thinks she needs him to, his entitlement boils into rage and he spirals into villainy. None of us were rooting for Hal, or at least I hope we weren't, even though I do assume we know how deeply romantic rejection hurts. But we understood his journey from point A to point B. We understood how the nice guy masks their obsession and entitlement with good deeds, how lost they are in their convictions, and the speed at which the gloves come off when they do not get their way. Even without having all the screen time in the world, Hal is still an interesting character to analyze for most. This is probably what I am missing in villain stories. Characters I understood without having to root for. Characters who didn't need to depend on good looks or exotic accents to keep an audience watching. And characters who didn't need backstories that victimize them to get the audience to understand them. Maybe it's not entirely the writers who are to blame. Perhaps it's just the way the world is moving right now. The political preachiness, performative activism, the pedestaling of victimhood that continues to reduce media literacy amongst young audiences. But is the answer to all of this just pandering to an audience's lack of understanding and dishing surface-level villains that they can thirst after? I don't think so. We don't need any more misunderstood villains who were secretly good all along and we were just the jerks who didn't get them in the first place. Or villains so good-looking that at the end of the day that is all that matters. Not to be mean, but, sidetrack. Make villains ugly again. What I think our impressionable audiences deserve are villains who make them think critically and help them understand the complexities of human nature. The villains we grew up with didn't make us root for evil, but they did make us understand why they chose it, even if we weren't willing to make that choice for ourselves. That is what needs to come back.